Well, it's very good to be here. My brother-in-law is from Adelaide. I believe his parents are in the audience somewhere. Tony and Flea, you there? Somewhere. Yeah, hi, somewhere there. And it's I've been hearing a lot of stories about this place over the years, so very nice finally to get here. Sorry to keep you all waiting. What I thought I'd do is to work through just little short extracts from each of my travel books. And to give you an idea of how things have changed with my travel writing. I've just come back to travel writing after 10 years away. Like many people in my profession, I found that suddenly the lure of setting off on the open road slightly diminished when you had small kids. So for 10 years I pretended I was a historian. But my youngest is now 10 years old, and I have a patient wife. And so I've been out on the road last year. Again, after a break. And it's been very interesting for me to rediscover all these books I wrote not quite as a teenager, but in my 20s, which have been sort of locked away in a back cupboard since I became a father. So, to open, this is a book called In Xanadu, which is a very silly student travel book written when I was at university, which is deeply embarrassing in all sorts of ways. But it's about very much a kind of almost a school trip. My college at Cambridge was fabulous in that it had all these amazing prize funds for ambitious, energetic students. And if you bothered applying and sort of putting in applications, you could get this money and go off places. And I remember the day after the sort of end-of-term exams, typing out a sheet. There was a fund for medieval historians, which is what I was studying. And the idea was that if you applied to go and sort of see a castle in Normandy, you'd get a little bit of money. But if you did something a bit more ambitious, you get a bit more. So I looked at I got out a Times historical atlas and saw what's the longest single medieval journey that I could find. And it was, of course, Marco Polo. So I typed out a single A4 sheet about this. And then to my horror, I actually got the check and I had to go and do the journey. And it all sort of went wrong from day one, including my girlfriend leaving me, who was meant to come with me just before setting off, and ending up travelling with a girl, with the bossiest girl in England, who's now the youngest director of Tesco's, and is masterminding the takeover of rural Britain by huge mega malls. Anyway, she was a fantastic companion and got me through all sorts of places like Iran, which otherwise I would probably have wimped out of going to. And I'll just read you. I mean, it's a very silly book, this, but I'll just read you the sort of thing that's in it. This is a typical scene crossing with her the border from Iran into Pakistan. And anyone that's ever been to India or Pakistan will have had many conversations like this. You'll know the form. "What is your good name, Saab?" asked the customs officer. "And what is your mother country?" I told him. They were the old familiar questions. He took down a few more formal details. "Are you Wad?" he asked. "What do you mean?" "Are you a Lady Wad?" "That's not English." You do not speak English, Saab?" "I am English. There didn't seem any point in muddling the issue by bringing in Scotland at this point." "You have some words of English?" "Yes, a number. I am an Englishman." This was an aspect of South Asia I'd forgotten. "Are you and Lady Wad?" He made an obscene gesture with the first finger in his right hand. "Wed? Do you mean are we wed?" "Yes, are you and Lady Wad?" "No." "Not Wad?" "No, I am not wed." "I'm sorry, Sab, I'm not understanding your English. I think perhaps you are not speaking English good, Sab." "May I ask, what is your mother tongue?" "Look, I've told you I'm an Englishman and I speak English extremely well. Jesus Christ." "Jesus?" "He's calling upon his God," exclaimed the second customs officer. "You are angry with me, Sab?" No, look, I'm not angry. I just want to get on." "Sab, just one question." "What?" You like bottom? He pointed at me. I look like... No, sir, but you like bottom. I look like? No, sir. You like bottom. I like bottom. Look, I don't understand, I said. I really didn't. Bottom, he said, wiggling his head from side to side in the Indian manner. I like bottom. I am bottom fan. You like bottom? Well, I like some bottoms, I said. You do like bottom. You are bottom fan. Yes. All English people are liking bottom. Oh, yes, said the second customs official. All Pakistani people are liking Imran Khan. All English people are liking Ian Bottom. It was about sort of 500 pages of that sort of thing. The next book is City of Jinns, which is a slightly more grown-up book, I'm glad to say. With my wife, I went back to Delhi to live as a young foreign correspondent. My newspaper closed within 6 months of arriving there. But luckily, the Indian bureaucracy moved so slowly, I didn't actually get accreditation for it until 6 months after it had closed. And it then took sort of 4 years for the Indian bureaucracy to work out that the paper no longer existed. So I had 4 delicious years with a press pass going around South Asia. But the place I really fell in love with was the place I was actually living, Delhi. And Delhi was a very odd kettle of fish in all sorts of ways. It's the centre, it has been the centre of South Asian culture and civilization since the 12th century, certainly of North Indian culture, the school of manners, the place with the most refined language, the most perfected cuisine, and so on. Everyone for 400 or 500 years used to look to Delhi, the city of the great Mughals, and before that of the Delhi Sultans, as the centre of authority, legitimacy, and high culture in South Asia. And yet, arriving in Delhi in the late 80s, there was almost nothing at all refined or cultured about Delhi. It used to behave like a nouveau riche heiress rather than some aristocratic dowager. Because in 1947, at partition of India and Pakistan, one of the great, most tragic upheavals of modern history took place, when, among many other tragedies, the entire educated Muslim elite, who had in many ways defined the high culture of Delhi, emigrated to Pakistan, where they sank quickly to the bottom of the heap and were never really accepted in Pakistan, while millions of uneducated, hard-working, entrepreneurial Punjabi Hindus, expelled violently from their homes in Pakistan at the birth of that country, arrived as refugees in Delhi, and with no fondness and with very good reason to be suspicious of the Indo-Islamic culture of the capital, began to build a completely new city in its place. So you have a disjunction similar to sort of the thing you find in Israel. You find a young city living in the middle of ancient ruins. That there are people, most of whom have only been there for 30, 40, 50 years, living in the shadows of a great Islamic city. And it took a long time to work out what was going on, why Delhi was so very different to the Delhi of myth. And in the end, I decided to go to Karachi to see one of the greatest writers on Delhi, who had been expelled at 1947 and was now living in Karachi. This was a guy called Ahmed Ali, who wrote a masterpiece, which is available now, and I highly recommend, called Twilight in Delhi. And he was, in many ways, one of the very first of this fantastic wave of Indian writers in English, who now every year pick up the Booker or a Pulitzer or certainly get rave reviews, the Salman Rushdies, Vikram Seths, Arundhati Roys, Amitav Ghoshes. most recently Adiga. And Ahmed Ali was, in many ways, the grandfather of all these. He wrote a book called Twilight in Delhi, describing the Urdu Indo-Islamic culture of Delhi, this mixed civilization that existed before partition, before the splitting of those two interwoven weaves. And he now lived in exile in Karachi and hadn't published anything for many years. And it took a while to track him down and find out what had happened. Ahmed Ali was there to meet us. He wore severe black-rimmed glasses, above which sprouted a thin pair of grey eyebrows. He slurred his consonants and had the slightly limp wrist and effete manner of one who modelled himself on a Bloomsbury original. His book, incidentally, had been published by E.M. Forster and Virginia Woolf at the Hogarth Press. But the first edition was almost entirely lost when it was the Hogarth Press warehouse was bombed during the Blitz. For a man once seen as a champion of Delhi's culture, a bulwark of Eastern civilization against the seepage of Western influence, Ahmed Ali now cut an unexpectedly English figure. With his clipped accent and tweed jacket, with old leather elbow patches, he could have passed off successfully as a clubland character from a Noel Coward play. But despite his comfortable, well-to-do appearance, Ahmed Ali was an angry man. Over the hours I spent with him, he spluttered and spat like a well-warmed frying pan. The first occasion was when I inadvertently mentioned that he was now a citizen of Pakistan. "Poppycock, balderdash," he said. "I was always against Jinnah. Never had any interest in Pakistan." "Steady on," said his friend Shanul Haq. "The devil," said Ali. "Pakistan's not a country, never was. It's a damned hotchpotch. It's not your country or my country." He was shouting at Shanul Haq now. "It's a country of a damned bunch of feudal lords, robbers, bloody murderers, kidnappers." The outburst spluttered out into silence. "But," I ventured, "didn't you opt for Pakistan? Surely you could have stayed in Delhi had you wanted to." There was another explosion. "I opted for Pakistan? I did not. I was the visiting professor in Nanking when the blasted partition took place. The bloody swine of Hindus wouldn't let me go back home, so..." "What do you mean?" "I went and saw the Indian ambassador in Peking. Bloody swine said I couldn't return. Said it was a question of Hindu against Muslim, and there was nothing he could do." "Careful," said Shanul Haq, seeing the state his friend had worked himself up into. "So how did you end up in Karachi?" I asked. "When my salary in Nanking was stopped, I found my way to some friends in Hong Kong. They put me on an amphibious plane to Karachi. Where else could I have gone if I couldn't go back to Delhi?" Ali had now ceased to quiver with rage and was now merely very cross. "I never opted for Pakistan," he said, gradually regaining his poise. "The civilization that I belong to, the civilization of Delhi, came into being with the mingling of two different cultures, Hindu and Muslim. That civilization flourished for 1,000 years undisturbed until certain people came along and denied that that great mingling had ever taken place." "Views like that can hardly have made you very popular here," I said. "They never accepted me in Pakistan, damn it. I've been weeded out. They don't publish my books. They've deleted my name. When copies of Twilight in Delhi arrived at the Karachi customs from India, they sent them back, said the book was about the forbidden culture from across the border. They implied that the culture was foreign and subversive." "In that case," I said, "can't you go back to Delhi? Couldn't you reapply for Indian citizenship?" "Now, no country is my country," said Ali. "Delhi is dead. The city that was, the language, the culture, everything I knew is finished." "It's true," said Shanul Haq. "I went back 13 years after partition. Already everything was different. I stayed in a new hotel, the Ambassador, which I only later realized had been built on top of a graveyard where several of my friends were buried. In my mahalla, everyone used to know me, but now I was a stranger. My Haveli was split into 10 parts and occupied by Punjabis. My wife's house had become a temple. Delhi was no longer the abode of the Delhiwala. Even the walls had changed. It was very depressing. Before partition, it was a unique city, said Ali. Although it was already very poor, still it preserved its high culture. That high culture filtered down to the streets. Everyone was part of it. Even the milkman could quote Mir and Dagh. The prostitutes would sing Persian songs and recite Hafiz. They may not have been able to read or write, but they could remember the poets. And the language, said Shah-ul-Haq. You cannot conceive how chaste Delhi Urdu was. And how rich, said Ali. Every mahalla had its own expressions. The language used by our ladies was quite distinct from that used by the men. Now the language has shrunk. So many words are lost. We talked for an hour about the Delhi of their childhood and youth. We talked of the eunuchs and the Sufis and the pigeons and the poets, of the monsoon picnics in Meroli and the Jinn who fell in love with Ahmed Ali's aunt. We talked of the sweetmeat shops which stayed open until 3 a.m, the sorcerers who could cast spells over whole mahallas, the possessed women who used to run vertically up the Zanana walls, and the miraculous cures effected by Hakim Ajmal Khan. The old men swam together through great oceans of nostalgia before finally coming ashore on a strand of melancholy. But all of that is no more, said Ali. All that made Delhi special has been uprooted and dispersed. Now it is a carcass without a soul, said Shah-ul-Haq. I am a fossil, said Ali, and Shah-ul-Haq is on his way to becoming a fossil. But nevertheless, I insisted, if you both love Delhi so much, wouldn't you like to see it one more time? I will never see that town again, said Ali. Once I was invited to give some lectures in Australia. There was a mechanical fault and the plane was diverted to Delhi. The plane landed, but I refused to get out. I said, I'm not getting out. I did have to. You call your damn chairman. I'm not putting my foot on that soil which was sacred to me and now has been desecrated. They got the entire staff of the airport there to get me out, but I didn't move. How could I? How could I revisit that which once was mine and now was no longer mine? When they asked why I was behaving as I was, I simply sat in my seat and quoted Mir Taki Mir at them. What matters it, O breeze, if now has come the spring, when I have lost them both, the garden and my nest? What happened, I asked. The swine were all Punjabis, said Ali. Tell you the truth, I don't think they understood a bloody word I said. That was City of Jinns. The next book I wrote, I left Delhi for a while and went off around the Middle East and spent 9 months circling the Middle East, looking for the remains of the old ancient churches which once dominated that area. When one thinks of cities, of countries like Egypt, Syria, Lebanon, Turkey, one thinks today entirely of Islamic lands, forgetting that for 300 years this was the center of Christianity, the Christian world, during the early Byzantine period. And of course, this was the city where this was the area where Christianity was born and grew. Christianity was not born in London, however much the Victorians like to think that God was an Englishman, nor in Brussels or in Rome. It was born in Jerusalem and received its intellectual superstructure in cities like Damascus, Alexandria, Constantinople, Istanbul, and Jerusalem. And the extraordinary survival of these ancient early Christian churches like the Copts, the Syrian Christians, the Armenians, and the Palestinian Christians is one of the great sort of miracles of survival in adverse circumstances. And I found that a lot of the monasteries which were still going at the time of the Prophet Muhammad were going still today, albeit in slightly reduced circumstances. And I met many strange and wonderful men in the monasteries and shrines across the Middle East, but perhaps none stranger than the former policeman from Athens who'd become the guest master at the monastery of Marsaba, Father Theophanes. Look at it, said Father Theophanes, the monastery's tall, gaunt guest master, waving a hand at the rocky gorge beneath us. There it is, The valley of doom, the valley of dreadful judgment. Below us, the monastic buildings of Mar Saba fell away in a ripple of chapels, cells, and oratories, each successive layer hanging like a wasp's nest from the edge of a rock face. Opposite, the top of the cliff wall had turned an almost unnatural shade of red in the last of the evening light. The rock was pitted with caves, each formerly the cell of a Byzantine monk. All were now deserted. "It's very beautiful," I said. "Beautiful?" said Father Theophanes, rustling his robes in horror. "Beautiful? See down there at the bottom, the river. Nowadays it's just sewage from Jerusalem. But on Judgment Day, that is where the river of blood is going to flow. It's going to be full of Freemasons, whores and heretics, Protestants, schismatics, Jews and Catholics. More ouzo? Please." And the monk poured a thimbleful of spirit into a glass. When I gulped it down, he continued with his apocalypse. "At the head of the damned will be a troop composed of all the popes of Rome, followed by their deputies, the vice-presidents of the Freemasons." "Are you saying the Pope is a Freemason?" I asked. "A Freemason? He's the president of the Freemasons." Everyone knows this. Each morning he worships the devil in the form of a naked woman with the head of a goat. "Actually," I said, "I'm a Catholic." "Then," said Father Theophanes, "unless you convert to orthodoxy, you too will follow your Pope down the valley through the scorching fire. We will watch you from this balcony," he added. "But of course by then it'll be too late to save you." I smiled, but Father Theophanes was in full swing and clearly in no mood for joking. "No one can truly know what that day will be like," he said. He shook his head gravely. "But some of our Orthodox fathers have had visions. Fire, fire that will never end. Terrible, terrible fire will come from the throne of Christ, just like it does on the icons. The saints, those who are to be saved, in other words, the Orthodox Church, will fly in the air to meet Christ, but all sinners and all non-Orthodox will be separated from the elect. The damned will be pushed and prodded by devils down the fire, down the valley of Josaphat, past here, exactly the route those Israeli hikers took this afternoon, down, down to the mouth of hell." "Is that nearby?" I said. "Certainly," said Father Theophanes, stroking his beard. "The mouth of hell will open up near the Dead Sea." "That's in the Bible." "Of course," said Father Theophanes. "Everything I'm telling you is true." Anyway, he went on raving about Freemasons for the week I was there. And it was only at the very end that he said how they'd invented the supermarket barcode, the thing which you get swiped at supermarkets, and masterminded the ecumenical movement and other devious things like this. And it was only really at the end that I plucked up the courage to ask him, "Father Theophanes," I asked, my curiosity finally getting the better of me, "I don't understand why you're so worried by the Freemasons." "Because they are the legions of the Antichrist," he said, "the stormtroopers of the whore of Babylon." But I thought, these days Freemasons just held coffee mornings and whist drives and that kind of thing. "Whist drives?" said Father Theophanes, pronouncing the word as if it was some sort of satanic ritual. "Probably this whist drive also." "But their main activity," he said, nodding knowingly, "is to worship the devil. There are many steps, but the final step, is to meet with the devil and have homosexual relations with him. After this, he makes you Pope, or sometimes President of the United States." "President of the United States?" "Certainly," he said. "This has been proved. All of the presidents of the United States have been Freemasons, except Kennedy, and you know what happened to him." We have to finish the whole thing, I think. Just to break from the travel writing, just a little short reading from The Last Mughal, which is the history book I last wrote about the end of... thank you. Which is about the fall of Mughal Delhi and the great uprising of 1857. And the hero at the heart of it is this very unlikely figure, the last emperor, Bahadur Shah Zafar, who was a calligrapher, a mystic poet, a Sufi, and an amazing figure to stimulate this great last Renaissance which came to Mughal Delhi in the 1830s and 40s, long after it had ceased to be a centre of economic or political or military power. It continued as the centre of letters, and Zafar stimulated the last great Urdu poetic revival with the great geniuses of Urdu poetry like Ghalib and Zawq as the flowers of his court. Rather what the court of Elizabeth was to English poetry in the sonnet, so Zafar's court was to the Urdu ghazal. This whole world was swept away with incredible brutality after the failure of the 1857 uprising, the Indian Mutiny, as the British call it, or the First War of Independence, as it's called in India. Well, not unreasonably. I know what they mean. And the last sight we have of Zafar before he's expelled, the Times war correspondent, William Howard Russell, goes to visit him in his cell the night before he's banished forever to Burma, where he dies. And he describes the old man sitting in the stables where the British had put him, deprived of pen and paper, but writing poetry on the wall with a burnt stick. Fantastic final image of this man. And this is a translation by Ahmed Ali, the guy I went to see in Karachi, which he actually gave me on that visit, which I read earlier. And I put away in a drawer and didn't actually sort of use until I came to write this book 10 years later. This is Ahmed Ali's translation of those last verses, which were recorded and are now widely known in South Asia, partly through a movie called Lal Kila, Red Fort, with Muhammad Rafi in the 1920s, who popularized this. Anyway, this is an English translation of those final ghazals of Zafar. This is an old man about to be expelled from the city, which is now destroyed. His family have been murdered. All his children have been hung. And he's left only with his wife, and this is dedicated to her and to Delhi. When, in silks, you came and dazzled me with the beauty of your spring, you brought a flower to bloom, love within my being. You lived with me, breath of my breath, being in my being, nor left my side. But now the wheel of time has turned, and you are gone. No joys abide. You pressed your lips upon my lips, your heart upon my beating heart, and I have no wish to fall in love again, for they who sold love's remedy have shut shop, and I seek in vain. My life now gives no ray of light. I bring no solace to heart or eye. Out of dust to dust again. Of no use to anyone, am I? Delhi was once a paradise where love held sway and reigned, but its charms lie ravished now, and only ruins remain. No tears were shed when shroudless they were laid in common graves. No prayers were read for the noble dead. Unmarked remain their graves. The heart distressed, the wounded flesh, the mind ablaze, the rising sigh, the drop of blood, the broken heart, tears on the lashes of the eye. But things cannot remain, O Zafar, thus, for who can tell? Through God's great mercy and the Prophet, all may yet be well. To conclude, and I think I've only got 5 minutes left, the current book, 9 Lives, which I've just published, is a return to travel writing after 10 years. And I had the most fantastic year going around, slightly following my own whims, interviewing 9 individuals in the end. I mean, many more went before the book was reached its final form. But 9 people who in different ways represent 9 different religious traditions caught in this incredible change which India is undergoing. India will surpass the American economy by 2050. And in that, and the city next to my house in Delhi, Gurgaon, which when I moved there first was a city of 100,000, is now a city of 5 million people with multiplexes and all the usual kind of bollocks of a modern city. And this is transforming every aspect of Indian life. But I wanted to go and see what was happening to all the people that one reads about before one first visits India, the sadhus, the fakirs, all the representatives of the Buddhist monks, the Jain nuns, all these people who represent the very rich and diverse religious traditions of India. I've only got 5 minutes. I'll get straight on to doing a last reading, which is about the Bauls. Now, the Bauls, spelled B-A-U-L-S, nothing to do with Delhi Belly or B-O-W-E-L-L-S, are the great mystics of Bengal, and they reject mosque, temple, and church, idols, the idea that God is in the heavens, and they locate God entirely within the human heart. And like many mystics, believe that what's important is to cultivate love and devotion to the personal deity within, not to any external religious structures. And they preach by singing beautiful songs. I don't know if any of you are going to be at the Sydney Writers' Festival, but we're actually bringing a group of 6 of them over, along with some fakirs from India and a Tayam dancer who appears in the book, who's a prison warder for 9 months of the year, but then becomes a god for 3 months. And he's going to incarnate for you at Sydney. But anyway. And these Baul songs are incredibly beautiful. I'll just read you 6 lines. My soul cries out, caught in the snare of beauty of the formless one. As I cry by myself night and day, beauty amassed before my eyes surpasses moons and suns. If I look at the clouds in the sky, I see his beauty afloat, and I see him walk on the stars, blazing within my heart. Now, the 2 Bauls that I've written about in this book are Kanai and Debu. Kanai, a blind Dalit, son of a landless labourer. Debu, from a different end of the village Brahmin's son. But both of them rejected their homes and walked off to preach this philosophy through their songs in the railway carriages and tea shops of Bengal. And they have become inseparable friends, despite their very different backgrounds. And they'll both be coming to Sydney. But this is a description of the one time when they separated from each other. There was only one time when I left Kanai for an extended period, said Debu. This was when I became obsessed with trying to live without food, like the saints and yogis of the old stories. These saints controlled all their desires, so never ate. They lived on air alone. I wanted to find out if this was still possible. So I went off on my own and I found a wood apple tree in a forest near a pond. We believe these trees are very auspicious. I sat there in a loincloth and I meditated for 2 years, eating less and less until I stopped eating altogether, taking a vow that no food would pass my lips until I reached my goal and achieved enlightenment. I don't know how I lived. I had matted dreadlocks down to my knees, and I sat there not eating, not smoking, drinking nothing but water. I focused inwards, conserving my energies, and I sat there like that through 2 monsoons and 2 cold winters. I used to visit him, said Kanai. The villagers knew where he was and would lead me to him through the forest. They called him Beltala Babaji, the sadhu who sits under the wood apple tree. He was very thin and very weak. He hardly moved or talked, only very short sentences. I was anxious that he wouldn't survive, and it pained me that he wouldn't eat. I brought him food, but he refused to eat it. He was very determined. I don't know what I attained by this penance, said Debu, but I know that my mind was at peace as never before. My hair was matted, but the knots of my heart were untied. After a certain point, I stopped feeling hunger. I was at the end of desire, beyond the senses. It was then that I started hallucinating. I was no longer living inside my body. I was somewhere outside of myself, in a state of ecstasy and rapture. I've never felt anything like it before or since. And then, one cold, starry night around the time of Makar Sakranti, I felt suddenly lost, as if my mind had finally detached itself from my body, like a bird flying high. It was Kanai who brought me back. What do you mean? I was unaware of it, but there had been a terrible storm. Kanai had a premonition that I was in trouble and came over from Tarapit to see if I was all right. He arrived early in the morning with a group of villagers and found me up to my neck in a pool of mud, fast asleep. They all thought I was dead, and I suppose I almost was. Kanai brought me back to his house in Tarapit and nursed me back to health. The blind man saved the man who could see, said Kanai, chuckling to himself. Sometimes the mad and the sightless can understand things better and more clearly than the sane and the sighted. The blind, said Debu, are never deceived by appearances. Maybe, said Kanai, it is only those of us who have no eyes who can see through the lure of Maya, illusion, and glimpse reality for what it is. Thank you very much.